I don't want to give people money. I don't want to hand them a fish. I want to teach them how they can be part of the world. That's what Bitcoin does. That's why we don't want to burn the system down. That's what it can do. That's the promise of this system. Exchanging wealth, not because of government controls. The first thing that happens whenever we have government-based capital is capital flight. Anyone remember the Mexican currency crisis? It's Switzerland. We've got to have some bankers here, don't we? Okay, long story short, basically what happened was the government was spending too much money issuing bonds. They had their money pegged to the US dollar. Of course, when you peg something to the US dollar and you have a differential, arbitrage. Then a whole lot of nasty speculators came in and arbitraged the hell out of it, and, well, Mexico went down the tube. Same thing happened in Thailand. Whole lot of bonds. Everyone thought that, hey, government backing, yay. Except those people in the government who see problems talk to their big friends. And their big friends get out first. That's what capital flight is. It's not like we can do with Bitcoin. It's not a synonymous system that doesn't need government, that makes everyone on a level playing field. It's where we're mates. Got to help our mates, don't we? The future of Bitcoin. So that screen image is from my computer in 2013. It's also there. That's part of a database structure that we're still building. One day we'll finish it. In 2013, I talked to a company called Temenos. Anyone heard of them? Couple people. I tried to get them to help me build a core banking platform for Bitcoin. Evil, I know. They couldn't. So we've spent a few years in other projects that we didn't want to talk about, and this is one of them. So yes, I have a core banking platform that is actually derived on Bitcoin. Fiat tokenized on Bitcoin. Bitcoin on Bitcoin. Assets tokenized on Bitcoin. What can I say? I'm a maximalist. So, this is what we want. We want not Aldous Huxley's Brave New World. I want Adam Smith's Brave New World. Do you know what Adam Smith's other two books are about? Anyone? Wealth of Nations and that 20-page title that he had? No? Virtue. The guy wrote on virtue. The heart of capitalism is not mercantilism. It is not crony capitalism. It is not how do we exploit people. It's how do I trade? How do I do a deal where we both benefit? That's what we want to build. So, N-Chain have been rather secret for quite some time. And yes, I'm still employed there, strangely enough, contrary to what all these things have said and whatever else. And I'm going to be kept there for a while. And I'm not going to tell you my whole life. The end. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Hi, Dr. Craig, Dr. Wright. I was born in Zimbabwe and live in South Africa now, and as you can imagine, there's enormous appetite for Bitcoin. For the last year, I've been building products that kind of fill that question mark between your Bitcoin and your profit, helping Africans use Bitcoin. So we've got a whole lot of ways for them to get it and to spend it and remit it cross-border. And also, because I've been in the space for quite a long time, working with the banks on blockchain, I've managed to get very friendly with the Reserve Bank, our South African Reserve Bank. So I advise them and do workshops with them around blockchain. So they're very friendly, actually, towards this idea of Bitcoin, and they're allowing me to build these products out and to try and make Bitcoin actually usable. And that's, in fact, why I'm delighted with Bitcoin Cash, because it makes Bitcoin actually usable for Africans.
Well, it gives it the scale. It's not usable yet. We still need a friendly wallet.
Okay. So now this is exactly what I'm doing. I'm building out all that. Happy to show it to you if you like. But eventually, more and more people will use Bitcoin, and it's going to start taking over. So how do you envision the central bank looking at it one day when people live and move and breathe within Bitcoin, and their monopoly of the currency obviously becomes a problem?
All right, I hate to say this. Even Keynesians can use Bitcoin. I really hate to say this because the idea of neo-Keynesian thought has been corrupted. Now, what happens now is debt instruments. Now, the original idea of Keynes, and I have to keep saying this, I don't like Keynes. Keynes had, the quote I'll like to say is, Keynes had a theory designed to keep Keynes a lord. And that's what it's about. Keynes had an idea that in the good times, governments would be able to save money. They would then be able to draw down on the savings in the bad time. Now, Keynes was also very foolish. He might have been in the House of Lords and might have been whatever else, but he never really understood government. Because the reality is, in the good times, governments spend money. In the bad times, governments spend money. That's the problem. So Bitcoin can actually work for reserve banks. In the good times, when there's a boom, and they're getting revenue in and everything's working, that can actually be fiscally sensible and save money. They can start planning. You know, all these things in Europe they're saying we shouldn't have to do. Like the Spanish government at the moment saying, we shouldn't have to do this. Why does the naughty EU try and constrain us? And the Greeks did the same, and yada, yada, yada. But they can. And here's the great thing with it. You can't cheat. China wants a gold standard again. There's a reason China owns the majority of the world's gold at the moment, unmined. So the Americans have got a whole lot sitting there, and China has all the stuff in the ground, because no one's mined gold in China because they used to think silver was better. Now they've got a big ton of gold that they've worked out they can sort of dig up, and the Americans aren't happy because, well, we don't want a gold standard if those guys have got more. But Bitcoin allows it. It allows your reserve bank to actually have monetary policy that is responsible. You know, what they promise to do.
Where's the next question?
When you gave birth to Bitcoin, why did you call it Bitcoin? I mean, coin is just like the word thing that is describe the blockchain, and we have to live now with this picture.
All right, that's a loaded question that I'm not going to address for many reasons. But if I was naming something, no one would be happy with the name. I had a company in Australia that everyone thought was weird because it was called Chaos and Financial Forecasting in Economic Systems, and PDY Limited. And everyone said, that's a terrible name for a company. And I went, but that's what it does. So, anyway.
Okay, next question. At least you tried, I guess. Yeah? I think it was worth a try.
Well, I just have a little question. Why did you make the nonce as small as it is now, and what's your opinion on ASIC boost?
Another loaded question. All right, ASICs are not an issue. ASIC boost is not an issue. What you're actually getting with the non-existent analysis that has been done to discredit it is probably, at best, if it was actually to work, and it would be probabilistic, maybe a 5% revenue gain, which equates to under a 1% gain. Now, it's also easy to detect, which means you would actually be advertising the fact that you're doing it as you're getting 1% revenue. It's probably not a good thing as a miner. Now, there are also attacks that I won't go into if you are ASIC boosting. So there are ways of blocking blocks made with ASIC boost, all sorts of things. So it's a possibility. Who cares? But at the same time, ASICs aren't bad. The idea of centralization is flawed. We don't get more centralized by having bigger machines. I keep pointing out that Newman Strogris and whatever else, back when they got themselves a whole lot of awards and got into science, came up with the idea of a small world network. This is the thing that inspired the 6 degrees of Kevin Bacon and whatever else. This is the idea of interconnectivity and sorts of networks that we have with Bitcoin. Not meshes, not loosely coupled systems that end up with diversified giant nodes, which means little groups having to go through centralized control, but basically everyone talking to everyone. And large machines, large networks doing that are actually incredibly efficient. Bitcoin without Raspberry Pis is the most efficient computer network on Earth, like it or not. And people can say, oh, but you're sending everything. But you have to send everything to every node anyway. That's the whole point. Every node that is involved with this gets it. But they get it in one hop most of the time. And that means they don't replay. They don't sit there bouncing around the network 50 times. That's why it's important to actually have powerful machines. It's also, and I'll plug a paper that no one ever reads, that I published back originally in 2011. It was to do with territorial nature of botnets and mining of all these things that were prevalent at the time. Because Bitcoin was actually being used in 2011 and 2010, well, as a source of revenue for a whole lot of guys in the Russian business network and other such things. What they would do is get 5-10 million machines, sometimes, that were the largest ones were 20 million, and mine Bitcoin. And then you have the bad guys, the dishonest people running Bitcoin network. The people who care about short-term gains and don't have an investment and don't care as much about losing something they're going to lose anyway. ASICs change that. ASICs create a power differential such that those 10 million machines are less powerful than a 1% miner is today. That 1% miner can take out any group of botnets that want to come and try and attack Bitcoin. So at the end of the day, the network becomes more robust. It becomes stronger. It becomes faster. It has more power that needs to be reversed. And that's what we want. It's not about running your own node and sitting there going, I'm part of the network. It's about having a network that distributes transactions from me to you fast and settles them fast. Peer-to-peer doesn't mean that we have this big mesh. That's a fallacy. Peer-to-peer means I send a transaction to you. So I've got this guy, and I'll pick on him at the moment, and I want to do a transaction with him. I write my transaction to send him money. I don't care. Quite frankly, I don't care. He does. When I give him that transaction, he cares that it gets to the network, not me. The original version of Bitcoin, up for the first year, had IP to IP protocol. The whole nature of that was so that me to you. That enabled sending directly. That's what peer-to-peer is. Not all the nodes get my transaction and everyone runs a node. That's not peer-to-peer. Nodes getting a transaction isn't peer-to-peer. You and I directly exchanging cash is peer-to-peer. So I hope that answers your question about ASICs and ASIC list.
Okay, so I have one remark and one question. The remark is you might want to check your references on equity and equality because equity is actually a socialist idea of redistribution of wealth. And the real question is, why did you claim to be Satoshi when you clearly are not?
Number one, equity was actually introduced well before that. The concept goes back to, actually, it was mentioned in a Greek play called The Frogs.